The State of the Union. Section 1. Historical background, concepts and principles. There is a connection between biblical scripture and the operation of commercial law from those times past up to today. Commercial law and the operation thereof is constant and operates in all that you do. The Bible is not about religion, but rather a coded message for sovereigns and how to live in honor and peace as creditors. Redemption is defined as the deliverance from the power of alien dominion and the enjoyment of the resulting freedom. It involves the idea of restoration to one who possesses a more fundamental right or interest. The best example of redemption in the Old Testament was the deliverance of the children of Israel, Americans, from bondage, from the dominion of the alien power of Egypt, Washington, D.C., in the natural sense of delivering or setting Israel free from the Roman yoke. The commercial definition of redemption may be stated as the recognition and action taken to redeem the debtor and all the property pledged, to take control, to file notice, to lien all the property, to restore rights, titles and interests in property, to sever the commercial bondage, and acquire the standing and capacity to discharge all fines, fees, taxes, debts and judgments of the debtor, and all commercial matters due to the U.S. bankruptcy, also known as national emergency, imposed upon the people without full disclosure and consent, and salvation from the states or circumstances that destroy the value of human existence or human existence itself. The word redeemer and its related terms, redeem and redemption, appear in the Bible 130 times and are derived from two Hebrew roots, PDH and GL. Though used to describe divine activity as well, they arose in ordinary human affairs, and it is in this context in which they must first be understood. PDH is the more general of the two, with cognates of related meaning in Akkadian, Arabic and Ethiopic. It belongs to the domain of commercial law and refers to the payment of an equivalent for what is released or secured. The verb PDH, unlike GL, indicates nothing about the relation of the agent to the object of redemption, which in the Bible is always a person or another living being. Its usage does not differ in cultic activity from that of a normal commercial transaction. In both cases, a person or an animal is released in return for money or an acceptable replacement. Gil is connected with family law and reflects the Israelite conception of the importance of preserving the solidarity of the clan. The goal, Redeemer, is the next of kin who acts to maintain the vitality of his extended family group by preventing any breaches from occurring in it. Thus he acquires the alienated property of his kinsman or purchases it when it is in danger of being lost to a stranger. Cognate, a person or thing related in origin. Registration, Social Security. It came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. Registered, as utilized currently, also means to submit information into a book. It also means to surrender title, like the registration of your car, the right to vote, or compulsion to register for the military draft. Debtor slaves on the plantation register, sovereign free men do not, though in some cases it is appropriate, as sovereign, to register your debtor, obedience to God. Then stood there up one in the council, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a doctor of the law, had in reputation among all the people, and commanded to put the apostles forth a little space. And he said unto them, Ye men of Israel, take heed what ye intend to do as touching these men. For before these days rose up Theudas, boasting himself to be somebody, to whom a number of men, about 400, joined themselves, who was slain, and all, as many as obeyed him, were scattered and brought to naught. After this man rose up Judas of Galilee in the days of the taxing, and drew away much people after him. He also perished, and all, as many as obeyed him, were dispersed. And now I say unto you, refrain from these men, and let them alone. For if this counsel or this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God. Subjection, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. Keep in mind, as it is in our nature as men and Americans to defend and resist, you must learn to agree with thy adversary. However, under the godly principle, You are to submit to God's authority, and the public servants are to submit to your authority, for the people are above the government. You serve your God or belief structure, and the public servant is to serve you, his master. And that's the way it is unless you contract with the government, pre-sent. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We are to present ourselves, not be represented, or as more commonly seen, represented in court by an attorney who is there only to represent the corporate fiction in the administrative unit court, to administer the bankruptcy and the pledges of the property to the state, and to take the revenue from the debtor slaves of the plantation. Represent. And he said, Woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for ye laid men with burdens grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. Woe unto you, lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. Ye entered not in yourselves, and them that were entering in ye hindered. This pretty well speaks for itself. Firstborn of Egypt. When Moses led the Israelites, government agencies, out of Egypt, it was done with the killing, execution by an executive of the firstborn of Egypt. In other words, under the execution of the law by the hand of the individual, the government was redeemed, but the individuals were never redeemed. Now, with the second contract cross, the individual will be freed or redeemed by his endorsement of the acceptance of the offer contract, which is for both his and the government's mutual benefit. The attorneys or legal profession took the industrial society into the beer and closed the door to the temple, not only barring themselves from entering, but barring and forbidding all those others to enter therein for redemption. Acceptance for value, the principal aspect of redemption. Agree with thine adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way, court with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. This is the cornerstone of the concept that you must understand this verse and apply it today. Today's court system deals with two kinds of persons, creditors and debtors, masters and slaves. By accepting for value the presentment offered, we become the holder of it, and the roles being played out are immediately reversed. By agreeing and accepting with thy adversary, you remove the controversy that brings life into the action in the courts. No controversy, no need to have a judicial decision. Common law versus private law. To understand common law in its usage and applications, we first need to realize that it is law by execution, or the law that was called the Mosaic law that has evolved into the Roman civil law that is the base for today's statute law. Therefore, common law is statute law by execution, which requires public agreement, that is in public use today, which carries a public liability, a tax collection for its usage. In America, we have both common stock employees and preferred stock inalienable rights. In order for the government to regulate its common stock consumers, it has taken an assumed tax exemption / priority of the individuals, which are using the industrial goods and services of the nation. By partaking of the industrial products, there is a tax that must be collected in order to keep record and track of all the industrial energy usage. And all common stock / public funds have a public liability, as these funds represent the energy. Money is the evidence of transfer of energy that must be regulated. We volunteer to pay the taxes just by our use of industrial goods and services, which is why it is a voluntary tax system. If you do not use any of the industrial goods, then there are no taxes. In order to use the industrial goods and services without the requirement of taxes, we must accept the charges and direct them back to the government, all 100%, and thereby we lend our tax exemption / priority to the government to discharge the public liability. This exchange gives us an employer status or inalienable rights, the preferred stock, which then allows us to enjoy all the goods and services at our will. The common law evolves from the Old Testament, and our private law inalienable rights come from the New Testament, which is the fulfillment of the law by operation. All public law is execution of law or Old Testament, and the New Testament is international law, but an individual can only fulfill it voluntarily by operation. The operation of law can only operate when no malice or vindictive harm is intended and is based upon the conscience of those charged to uphold it. It is purely spiritual. With common law rights, constitutional rights, we are considered by the IRS to be employees of the federal zone or non-resident aliens. With our unalienable rights, we volunteered into the federal zone with our priority exchange for the tax exemption, and therefore we are now the employer. Therefore, common law is unto death, and it cannot give eternal life, as it operates only by execution, death, to transfer the energy through the principle. Private law, operation of law, is unto life, as it is done by acceptance. The acceptance of the charges of a contract through acceptance. Public liability, execution, is offset, giving life. It does not require the death of the principal to redeem. The energy is transferred not through the principal, but by the principal. Once you understand the full power of Calvary, acceptance for value of what Christ did on the cross for each of us, you will understand how our debt, sin creates debt, is paid in full. Defendant: all the time you have spent in your life researching and studying the law and the rules must be reformed and relegated to and for historical purposes only. If you do not do this, you will always be a defendant. From now on, agree with your adversary quickly. The concept is new and will take time to understand. In the end, God's word and godly people always win. Theory of cognitive dissonance. Dissonance. Lack of agreement, consistency or harmony, discord. As computers go, the human brain is without parallel or parity when compared to even the most sophisticated man-made computer. Nevertheless, it is a computer, and like all computers, it can be programmed. There is a theory known as the theory of cognitive dissonance, TDC, which holds that the mind involuntarily rejects information not in line with previous thoughts and/or actions. Since ancient times, mind controllers have been enticing free people into servitude, piping them on board by taking advantage of man's tendency to generate cognitive dissonance. New events or new information create an unpleasantness, a dissonance with existing knowledge, opinion or cognition concerning behavior. When this happens, pressures naturally arise within the person to reduce the dissonance, not reconciling the new information with the old, but reducing the dissonance. The strength of the pressures to reduce the dissonance is a function of the magnitude of the dissonance. Dissonance acts in the same way as a state of drive, need, or tension. The greater the dissonance, the greater will be the intensity of the action to reduce the dissonance, and the greater the avoidance of situations that would increase the dissonance. A person can deal with the pressure generated by the dissonance by changing the old behavior to harmonize with information. But if the person is too committed to the old behavior and way of thinking, he simply rejects the new information. A simple, "I don't believe it" thought or word is the easy cop-out. For if you are unaware of being unaware. Kings. God made man both king and priest and said that man's insistence on having an earthly king to rule them instead of depending on God's word to rule them was the same thing as rejecting God. It still is. Then all the elders of Israel came to Samuel, "Make us a king to judge us like all the nations." And the Lord said, "The people have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Howbeit yet protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them." And Samuel told all the words of the Lord, "This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectionaries, and to be cooks, and to be bakers. And he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. And he will take the 10th of your seed and of your vineyards, and give to his officers and to his servants. He shall take the 10th of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And ye shall cry out in the day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you. And the Lord will not hear you in that day. If you are deemed a king and priest, a secured party, creditor, and sovereign, then what need of you to be ruled by tyrants, lying politicians, dictators and presidents? Are you not free? Can you not take responsibility? The career politician's creed: we will tax, 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 spend, spend and spend, and the voters will re-elect us, re-elect us, re-elect us, because they are too damn dumb to understand. We tax his pay, tax his play, even tax his time of day. We tax his shirt and tax his coat, tax his car and tax his boat. We tax his food and tax his drink, tax him good so he can't think. We tax his house, tax his chair by taxing his comb. We tax his hair by taxing his pills. We tax his health with taxes on taxes. We steal his wealth, and when he's sick, we'll tax his bed, tax him until he's good and dead. Then we'll place upon his tomb: taxes drove me to my doom. But after he's gone, we won't relax. We'll steal his kids home with an inheritance tax. Don't you find it curious that the sole solution of the politicians' remedy for every problem, for the most part of which they create, is the raising of taxes? Never do they reduce the size of government, never do they reduce their salaries. But at your cost you pay for everything, and even that which they waste. Men. In looking at the word men as they were created in the image of God, contract, this then shows that the man created was the industrial bond, which was created by the contract. The industrial bond is the image of industrial benefits for society, but when the deception took place, the system's operators, attorneys, deceived the financial institutions into believing that the debt-borrowed funds, municipal bonds, were what they needed, and thereby the debt money individuals were able to indebt all of society into believing the lie, and thereby destroyed the beneficial public government. It no longer had the debt-free industrial bonds men to operate for all of society's benefit. Then the industrial bonds were or are now based upon debt funds or municipal bonds, and therefore they are consuming all the energy funds needed to keep our society operating. In Genesis 6, which is about the energy that was taken from the public government, it was to hold it and use it to run the industrial society. The flood of public funds has again covered the earth, and it is time to charge back the debt, energy money, by use of the public policy HJR 192. The ARC is the private government treasury, Federal Reserve, that will act as the mediator to republic the public debt funds by private assignment or acceptance. Thereby, once again, the public government will hold the energy money for the industrial uses. After the true energy was perverted, the perverted funds were only for personal gain of a select few and were immoral funds. Therefore they cannot heal but only destroy whoever took part of their use. Men industrial bonds, privately held and assigned to the public government's or republic's use. Giants are the corporations formed by the attorneys or by the people that they induced, but either way they are not held by debt-free funds and are consuming not only the owners but also those who partake of their services or goods, as all corporations are held in bar by the legal society. Daughters, the lending institutions that are part of the corporate industrial system and obtain the assumed tax exemption of those who use their services. Ground, industrial costs, equal sign. The contract accepted the costs, and thereby the breath of life was established for the goods to be republic ed. Woman was formed as the public bond in offset to the private bond. Garden of Eden. All industrial goods and government are created for the benefit of those who know how to regulate and operate the system by contract, or today, the written word, by operation of law, New Testament. When the system is operating properly, it will benefit all individuals in the whole world. Corporations, being artificial and created by government, borrow from the government treasury, which holds the energy. But the government has both the corporate side for daily operation and the public person, and the agency for enforcement of public policy, regulation, and statutes. Whenever a public regulation/policy/statute is offended, the agency must hold someone responsible with commercial charges to mend the offense, either by imprisonment or by allowing the offender to use the charges to purchase public goods and services. When the individual is held in prison, the charges are used by the public for public needs and public expansion, but the individual who holds the charge is held on account with no personal use. Once a corporation manufactures a product that is consumed by the public, that is, public goods and services, that it has paid for, the public debt must be discharged via HJR 192, and an equal exchange must take place. The individual must hold charges from an offence before he/she can exchange this for public goods and services. Without the charges from an offence, an individual must or can only exchange public debt, unredeemed public funds for public debt, which is against the public policy HJR 192. The individual then can someday be held accountable for this offence, which will give him/her the charges required to discharge the public obligation within a limited scope, but only for the benefit of the public. Corporations need to take care of their inventory, stock people. This accountability can come in the form of either illness or legal redress. This occurs when a corporation either allows a person to hold and consume the public liability, which prevents it from passing through to the government, which causes the passover, or by holding the charges and energy back for the use and consumption of the industrial complex. We can be the holder in due course, which means someone, government, is holding the charges and energy for our benefit. In fact, this is what HJR 192 is all about. We are to pass our debt to the government instead of to another individual. When an individual does experience either medical or legal problems, the modern practices of either these professions, with their latest voodoo and chromium-plated theology practices, can only treat the symptom and not the root cause. If they were to treat the root cause, they would either bury or imprison their client. Because of their limited license, they are not allowed to attend to this primal concern, lest they obtain a charge that must be addressed and create a repetitive cycle that can never end. This is one reason why there is no remedy in the public system, though we need it, as it is the one that must regulate the commercial transactions between individuals, men, and governments. General information. Attorneys are limited, that is to say they must stay within their industrial license because they cannot make commercial claims, as commercial claims are commercial retail amounts, covered by the truth in lending requirements that hold persons personally responsible. The administrative license of an attorney in bar has no accountability, is thereby limited, and has no authority to convey title to anything. The only way that an attorney can enter the commercial zone is by the assumed tax exemption of some individual, or if hired by some individual man. Your UCC contract trust treasury account is the insurance for the full retail amount because it is the principal and the source. A sufficient amount is your acceptance of whatever the bill happens to be, since whoever tells you how much the bill is becomes the witness to the fact, the forebearer, who carries the burden of testimony by license. You bind that testimony by your acceptance. Your acceptance is the criminal charge, in fact. Acceptance of deficiency charges the deficiency to prepay closing of escrow. The calendar call is the exempt priority adjustment. The principal allows the agent to take the exempt priority to offset the deficiency or adjust the account to zero. In other words, the fiscal year and calendar year together make one whole year. Concept suggestion requests the circuit court deputy to take the deficiency charge of action and put it on the circuit court docket, and call the calendar, call the bailey broker in charge of the adjustment to deliver the same to the principal requesting release of the commodity. Putting the whole account into one account requests the order of the court to be released to the principal public education versus the monetary system. A lot is being requested of the young individuals that are coming from our primary education system. They, children, are being taught that they should go on to obtain a college education. Public education is just what it says. You're educated for use in the public system, and thereby you become accountable for the public liability debt that the public money carries. It is sold with the idea that with better public education, individuals will be better able to lead profitable lives by giving them the tools that they need to make greater amounts of money. In turn, they will be able to obtain the commercial products required to create a more comfortable life. First, we must take a look at how public money affects, or what it does, to an individual. Money is the evidence of the transfer of energy in commerce after the fact. So the commercial cause for the transfer has taken place before the actual event has happened. In other words, the public offer was made first, then the actual acceptance or need was exchanged. Because of this being the case, the individual who made the public offering thereby carried the public energy negative within themselves, speculation upon, and acceptance, which may cause other problems that can be medical, legal, or personal in nature. This suggests that the more available the public funds are for our use, the more likely we are to have other problems in our lives. We must remember that the true creation of money is by our endorsement, signature. Money created in any other method is by the acceptance of someone else's debt. Such a debt carries with it a negative charge, and this negative charge must be decayed in our bodies, which causes us to age, etc. The negative side is the public liability. It can only be discharged by our acceptance and charging back, or republic/revenue, the public money back to the public for the public to use. If this is done, there is no longer a public liability, and it will not carry the negative charges before. It states in the scriptures to seek ye first the kingdom, which is to find your own inheritance that was created at your birth, and thereby all other needs shall be taken care of. There is a maxim of law that says, the money of the sovereign is his credit, he is the wealth for which no substance on earth can establish a value for. You first must obtain your sovereignty. Not very many people are going to find their true sovereign rights, as they must learn to hold the criminal charge. And this is not publicly acceptable, as the public system cannot teach this. You must seek and do your own searching and not follow the government leader, as the system wants us to go along with their debt program of servitude and not to venture out on our own. This will label you as undesirable, but it is people like yourselves who lead and keep the public system in check. The public system is a necessary evil, and once an individual learns how to harness it for his/her benefit, the public liability shall no longer affect him or her. The public system is the system that we must live in, and it will provide us with all our needs. We must learn how to stop its uncontrollable liability by our acceptance and revenue, done very simply. When you have a need to know, you will search it out. Seek, and ye shall find. Thereby, when we accept more public education, it becomes a greater liability debt, and it becomes harder to obtain our true liberty. It is a built-in factor that when we accept public degrees, we become liable for the public's benefit. Should we obtain a public education, we need to keep private values that allow us to use the public education to enhance our ability to benefit the public and ourselves. Once we have learned to read, write, use math, research, and investigate, we can educate ourselves. But there are certain parts of the public educational system that can be used to benefit us beyond such basic instructional needs, such as vocational technical schools. Here we must be very careful not to obtain the education to serve the public master, but to harness it, not only for our own good, but for the good of the general public too. Public education is used to attempt to help people fill their needs, but in doing so, most want a fast fix and do not attempt to figure out what the real roots of the problems are. This is why the legal and medical fields are so volatile and keep individuals from searching for the truth and true healing. In Matthew chapter 23 and Luke 11, it states that people in these fields will be held accountable from Abel to Zechariah, or from A to Z. A lot of well-meaning people don't understand the private to public concept and encourage individuals to get a good education. Maybe we need to really get a good education on the private versus public accountability, and this can only be done by private study and experience. A public education looks good on paper, but it's the after results that may get you and hold you accountable, as in debt for the rest of your life, for the public liability. Republic. What does it mean to republic, or to have a republican form of government? The republic is referred to in the scriptures as heaven, or where the private held commercial stock is held by agents. It states in the scriptures that only your agent angel. Nowhere in the scriptures does it state that you're going to be in heaven. All references are to angels, agents in heaven. A government agent who by oath/bond must do your private commercial business as requested in writing. The spoken word is only hearsay, and as Christ said on the cross, it is finished, hearsay. We have to keep in mind that the government has only one function, and that is to regulate the commercial transactions, business between people and or states in light of the US bankruptcy, aka National Emergency March 9, 1933. The only way that the government has to measure these affairs is by the commercial paper passed between the individuals, which are valued by the tax value on the paper transaction. In order, after the order of the Melchizedek, Hebrews, for there to be no taxes due, there must be a tax filing or registration, as they are one and the same. In order for the registration to take place, it must be ordered by an individual, which, after registration, the immoral criminal usage is hereby diffused and the funds have been republicated. In the above reference to registration by an individual, the question could be asked why the government agent doesn't just register the commercial transactions. Then the funds would be diffused or redeemed, right? This would be Beelzebub casting out Beelzebub, or to put it in plain words, you cannot use a negative, a minus symbol, to reduce a negative. In the relationship with the government is a negative, infidel debtor. This leaves only one who